Revenge with Karen.
I knew something was off when I walked into the office and found our visionary CEO doing tequila shots with the CFO at 9:13 a.m. on a Tuesday. Not even trying to hide it. Lime wedges on a legal pad, salt crusting up a spreadsheet titled Budget Optimization. That's the kind of week it was shaping up to be. Someone was going to get thrown under the fiscal bus. Spoiler alert, it wasn't going to be the guy who named his dog after Elon Musk's kid. By 10:45, I was told I'd be transitioned. Budget cuts, strategic realignment, all the buzzwords used to slap lipstick on a corporate execution. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me rewind. My name's Julie. I was the project director for one of the most critical contracts at our SAW firm, government-backed, grant-heavy, loaded with all the delightful federal oversight that keeps compliance people up at night and makes investors sweat bullets. For 5 years, I was the quiet metronome in a sea of tambourine-shaking showboats. No scandals, no missed deadlines, no compliance flags. I got shit done, which is why I was allowed, encouraged even, to stay invisible. No keynote speeches, no Slack huddles with hashtags. I wasn't invited to Founders Fridays, or whatever culty crap HR was pushing to make work feel like church camp. But my inbox was where the real firepower lived. Legal notices, grant milestone checks, invoices to defense contractors, purchase approvals with 10 layers of audit trails. I didn't need praise. I needed working servers and a fresh diet Dr. Pepper. Now, I know 95% of you are listening to this while doing something else. Driving, doom scrolling, hiding from a meeting. But if this story's already got your blood warming up, take half a second to tap that subscribe button and throw a like on this. Seriously. It tells the team that what we're making matters and keeps us from living off vending machine trail mix. All right, back to the corporate train wreck. About 3 months before the tequila breakfast, our company had closed a major round of funding. I wasn't in the room when the investor contracts were signed, but I damn well reviewed the compliance terms. The investors were sharks, old school, institutional, allergic to risk. They didn't want ideas, they wanted guarantees. Part of the condition, for our flagship government project, someone had to be named key person, the linchpin, the non-negotiable glue. That someone ended up being me, not because I was flashy, but because I was safe. Proven, certified, the only person in the building who could answer questions about the federal procurement system without Googling. Did I ask to be listed on the term sheet? No. Did I say no when legal and the CFO told me it was just a formality? Also no. I signed, made a mental note, and got back to work. And that's how it went for a while. Until the CFO got spooked by market whispers and started hunting for budget cuts like it was Black Friday in his soul. Suddenly, non-revenue generating personnel became the bogeyman of the quarter. And who fits that vague, condescending label better than a 40-something woman who doesn't wear startup hoodies or talk over people in Zoom calls? Still, I wasn't worried. Not really, because I knew something they didn't. You see, in all their performative restructuring, they forgot one minor detail. You don't casually remove a key person from a federally tied, investor-backed contract without setting off alarms loud enough to wake the Securities and Exchange Commission. But like I said, we're getting ahead of ourselves. In those last few normal days, I kept my head down. Colleagues came to me quietly, asking for document links, clarification on deadlines, hand-holding through grant renewals they should have understood by now. I handed it all over with my usual calm. No bitterness. No fear. I had my own copies saved. I noticed something. The new HR director, some guy fresh out of a fintech dumpster fire, was pushing through offboarding checklists with all the grace of a malfunctioning Roomba. He'd skip sections, miss sign-offs, forget digital key revocations. And on my own exit checklist, one field stood blank, key person notification complete. I stared at that line like it was a fuse waiting to be lit. And I smiled, because even a ghost can pull the fire alarm. CFO didn't even look me in the eye. He just slid the envelope across the table like it was a check for a Girl Scout fundraiser and mumbled something about strategic downsizing. I looked down and saw my own name in 14-point Arial, neatly bolded under the words final separation terms. Budget constraints, he said. We're having to streamline operations. Realign resources. Streamline, realign. Built the damn spine of this company's only reliable revenue stream. Without me, their compliance with that government contract was a ticking time bomb. But I just nodded like I'd been expecting it. My mouth said, I understand, while my gut whispered, they have no idea what they've just done. He started talking about transitional goodwill and bridge benefits, corporate gibberish meant to soften the blow. I wasn't listening. I was watching. His fingers kept twitching near his phone, like he was itching to text someone that the dirty work was done. He looked relieved. He thought this was going to be harder. It wasn't. I let him off easy. When I walked out of his office, it felt like walking through a funeral, except no one was brave enough to admit someone had died. People pretended to type, pretended to Slack message. One guy from marketing looked like he was about to say something and just blinked and swiveled back to his monitor like the shame might be contagious. I passed the break room on the way to my desk. Someone had left a half-eaten birthday cake with good vibes only spelled out in purple icing. Fitting. By the time I got back to my workstation, my internal calendar had already been deactivated. My company laptop blinked like it wanted to crash in solidarity. No exit meeting yet. No escort. Just radio silence and a weird draft of passive-aggressive pity hanging in the air. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Melissa, the junior project manager with anxiety in her eyeballs and a 72-ounce water bottle she carried like a shield. This doesn't make sense. You're the project, you are the grant. I stared at it for a second too long, thumbs frozen. But I didn't reply. Not yet. Because right then I spotted something. A detail. A mistake. When HR finally emailed my offboarding checklist, it was a sloppy PDF with half the fields blank. One in particular caught my eye. Notify stakeholders per key person clause, 6B, unchecked. Not even removed, just ignored. I blinked. Then reread it. Clause 6B. The very one that tied the company's funding compliance to my continued employment. Clause they added to pacify the lead investor who wouldn't release a dime until someone mission-critical was tied to the deliverables. It was literally called the Julie Clause in the first internal draft. I remember because the CFO joked about it in the meeting. Said, looks like you're stuck with us forever, huh? And everyone laughed like it was cute that the company was stapled to a middle-aged woman who still used color-coded binders. Now here they were, untethered, unaware, arrogant enough to think it didn't matter. I printed the checklist. Yes, I printed it on real paper, folded it once carefully, slipped it into my folder along with my signed termination letter and a flash drive I kept tucked inside my pencil case. By the time HR called me in for my exit experience, yes, that's what they called it, I was serene, not out of denial, out of clarity. Because that little empty checkbox told me everything I needed to know. It had no backup, no protocol, no comprehension of what that oversight meant. The HR guy was young, puffed up with PowerPoint confidence and a necktie he hadn't earned. He blinked a lot, spoke in upward lilts, and called me Juliana 3 times despite my name being written right in front of him. He offered me an EAP pamphlet like I just lost a hamster. I nodded, took it, gave him back my badge. But inside, my brain was humming. Not with revenge. Not yet, with a kind of bitter awe. They didn't just cut me. They unhooked the safety net and didn't even glance down. The HR exit interview felt less like closure and more like a forgotten appointment wedged between a catered lunch and someone's birthday balloon drop in the hallway. He didn't ask about knowledge transfer, didn't request a list of in-progress contracts or transition notes. Hell, didn't even know what department I technically reported to. He had to check the company org chart, which, incidentally, hadn't been updated since our last failed rebrand. He clicked through a templated exit slideshow, all corporate cheer and fake empathy. We value your contributions. Your next adventure awaits. Please return all company property. I handed him my badge, my laptop, my security token. What I didn't hand him was access to the compliance drive, because he never asked, and no one disabled it. I could still see everything: federal audit trails, contract archives, risk logs, internal memos, quarterly compliance reports, all the ugly little threads that, when pulled, would unravel this place faster than a Walmart sweater in a washing machine. He tried to wrap it up with a firm handshake and a flat smile, asked me if I had any feedback to improve the separation process. I almost laughed. I wanted to say, yeah, maybe check which people legally bind your funding before tossing them like expired yogurt. But instead, I just said nope, all good, and I walked out. Not with a bang, not with tears, just with that quiet, invisible ache of someone who gave everything and got airbrushed out of the picture like an ex-boyfriend in a family photo. Hallway felt longer than I remembered. Every step echoed like a drum roll for someone else's promotion. I passed the glass-walled war room, where the new leadership team was arguing over logo colors and brand refresh cycles, completely unaware that they'd just yanked the keystone out of their own damn arch. As I stepped into the elevator, Melissa, the same junior PM who texted me, caught the door with a trembling hand. "Wait," she said, breathless. She'd just run from one of her 15 overlapping stand-ups. "Didn't they name you on the term sheet?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. She wasn't trying to stir anything. She was confused, scared, smart enough to realize something was wrong, but too green to connect all the dots. I looked at her and smiled, not with malice, just the kind of weary smile you give someone who doesn't yet know how bad the fire's about to get. "Don't worry," I said, stepping back to make room. "They'll figure it out." She blinked. But the elevator dinged. I stepped off. She stayed on. Behind me, I could still hear someone in marketing pitching a TikTok campaign to boost executive relatability, as if hashtags could plug the crater they were about to fall into. Outside, the sun was blinding. I felt its warmth on my skin, unfamiliar after weeks of artificial light and recycled air. I didn't cry, but I did sit in my car for 15 minutes with the engine off, just listening to the ticking of the dashboard and trying to remember how breathing worked. I wasn't grieving the job. I was grieving the erasure, the speed with which I became unnecessary. Like the years I spent grinding through audits and translating bureaucracy into action meant nothing. But even in that moment, hands on the steering wheel, jaw clenched, blinking back something sharp, I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet, because I didn't need to plan it. I'd already built it, line by line, clause by clause, with every signature and email and policy draft. They'd given me the detonator. All I had to do now was wait for them to light the fuse. I didn't go home that night. I went to the diner, one off Route 14 with the cracked vinyl booths, and a waitress named Darla, who calls everyone Han regardless of how many teeth they have or how long they've been ghosting their cholesterol medication. It's the kind of place where the coffee's burned and the silence doesn't ask questions. I slid into the corner booth, ordered eggs I wouldn't touch, opened my laptop, and clicked open the folder I'd named Plan Z months ago, back when I started noticing how many streamlining initiatives involved quietly gutting departments and replacing experience with optimism and buzzwords. Plan Z wasn't revenge. It was insurance. For me, for the project, for the company technically, though that irony would be lost on them until it was far too late. First file, the investor term sheet. Clause 6B. There it was in black and white. In the event of separation, voluntary or involuntary, the designated key person, Julie M. Last name, company shall notify all relevant stakeholders within 48 hours. Failure to comply shall trigger immediate review of insurability and default clause Appendix C. Next file, the key person insurance rider. Tied to the same clause. High 7 figures payout, with coverage linked directly to me continuing as the project lead. I kept scrolling. Emails, memos, sign-offs from legal. One where the lead investor wrote, "We need assurance that Julie remains engaged," or the risk profile tanks. The timestamp on that one? A week before they brought in the new HR director, which meant it was still fresh in their due diligence files. Still binding, still radioactive. They hadn't just fired someone. They'd yanked the pin and dropped it down a storm drain. I stared at the documents for a long time, not with anger, with the kind of distant calm you get when you finally stop trying to hold the line and let the flood take what it wants. Let the wave roll in. Let gravity do the rest. I opened a blank email. To lead investor at firm name com, CC'd to the general inbox of the risk management team listed on the funding contact sheet. Subject: Clause 6B Notice of Separation Body. Per Clause 6B of the investment term sheet, I am no longer employed with company name as of today. Please see attached separation documentation. For questions regarding compliance, please contact the company directly. Attachment: Layoff letter Julie MPDF, no signature flourish. No sass. No passive-aggressive subtext. Just the facts. I click send. Watched the bar crawl across the screen like it was dragging a body. Then I closed the laptop, pushed away the plate of cold eggs, walked to the counter and paid Darla in cash. "Didn't touch your food," she said, popping her gum. "Wasn't hungry," I replied. She shrugged. "Some things are harder to chew than others. Ain't that the truth?" By the time I got home, my shoulders ached like I'd been carrying a piano up a hill. I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of wine, and sat in silence, watching the light fade through the blinds. No music, no TV, just the distant hum of a world that hadn't noticed it was about to change. And somewhere across town, in an inbox blinking like a bomb set to detonate, a lawyer was about to choke on his kale smoothie. The message had been sent. The timer had started, and I didn't need to raise my voice, swing a hammer, or call a lawyer. I just had to let the clause speak louder than I ever could. The first domino fell 27 hours after I sent the email. I was watering the succulents on my kitchen windowsill, ones I used to neglect during project deadlines, but suddenly remembered were alive, when my old phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. I didn't answer, let it go to voicemail. Then I opened my inbox. There it was. Automated notification, key person termination registered, policy reference. #07KP 98390, forfeit grant. Eat Investors Insurance Division had received the flag. Not because of my email, though that helped. No, this was a system trigger. The clause in the policy was wired to notify underwriters the moment any part of the funding package showed disruption to continuity. HR's delay in updating the registry hadn't saved them. It had damned them. Because by not acknowledging my departure officially, the system defaulted to the last received signal, Julie M. Last name removed. No replacement. No transitional plan. Just a black void where the key person used to be. The system did its job. Now the questions would come. Across the city, inside the company I'd just been ghosted out of, panic was starting to seep under the door like smoke from an unseen fire. I imagined someone, probably that poor junior admin they dumped all compliance tasks on, logging in to access one of the project drives I managed, getting access denied owner credentials required. Because you see, in all their streamlining, no one thought to reassign ownership on our internal platforms. Our data structure was built with me as the node, document routing, permissions, milestone approvals, audit logs. They'd cut the spine and expected the legs to keep walking. From what Melissa later told me, via a hastily typed message that practically vibrated with nervous energy. First real sign of trouble came when the accounting team couldn't locate the Q3 compliance receipts tied to our federal billing schedule. Not missing, just unrecoverable. And when someone tried to override the system to transfer ownership, the platform spit back this: restricted function government clearance required. Please contact the project director on file, which was me, which I no longer was. HR still hadn't updated the insurance registry. Legal hadn't read the fine print, or if they had, they'd assumed Clause 6B was just legalese fluff. Like most of the buzzword-addled brass, they never learned the difference between a term sheet and a napkin promise. But the insurer knew, and now the lead investor knew. Because 15 minutes after the policy alert, one of their analysts escalated it to risk. And risk doesn't do small talk, they do containment. Meanwhile, I kept quiet. I spent the morning doing laundry, syncing old files to a secure drive, and sipping coffee that tasted better than it had in weeks. Satisfaction isn't loud, it's steady. It's the knowledge that you don't need to scream to be heard, especially when the evidence is doing the screaming for you. Then I got an email that almost made me laugh. Subject: checking in from AJ. Mercer, Program Liaison, Federal Contracts Division Body. Hey Julie, hope you're okay. Received a partial bounce back on last week's compliance submission. Looked like credentials were revoked. Did something happen on your end? Did something happen? God, if only he knew. I typed a draft reply, deleted it, then typed another. Hey AJ, appreciate you reaching out. Things have shifted on my end, I'll loop you in when I can. For now, best to direct questions to the company. Then I added one more line. Oh, check Clause 6B on the funding agreement. Just a heads up, hit send. There. Now the federal oversight layer was awake, too. One by one, the pieces were falling, and all I'd done was leave. Investor relations tried to put a lid on it, but the pot was already boiling over. The first real crack came in the form of an emergency board meeting, scheduled for 7:00 a.m. on a Friday, which, in corporate terms, is basically code for we're about to bleed publicly and need to cauterize the wound before NASDAQ notices. They pulled everyone in. Zoom squares lighting up like terrified little bingo chips. The CFO, two junior counsel reps who looked like they'd been pulled from their Peloton class mid-pedal, a visibly hungover VP of product who thought this had nothing to do with him, it would. And most importantly, someone from the investors' risk division who didn't smile once during the entire call. His name was Sutton. First name, no one used it. Sutton didn't speak, he deployed sentences like drones. Precise, cold, lethal if necessary. He let the CFO start. We've had an unexpected personnel shift, the CFO began, voice sugar-coated with that artificial calm that always precedes financial organ failure. Julie last name, she was our former project director, as part of a broader restructuring move aimed at optimizing headcount. She's been replaced. Smoothly, no disruptions. There was a pause, too long. Sutton blinked slowly like a reptile warming up. And the replacement, he asked, voice flat as concrete, is certified under FAR compliance, possesses the required clearance level for grant oversight, and has historical continuity with the project's audit trail. The CFO hesitated. That sound was the iceberg scraping the hull. Well, we're still evaluating internal options. We have multiple qualified who, Sutton interrupted. The room went silent. You could practically hear the VP of product sliding his phone off screen to mute Slack notifications. The CFO tried again. We've identified a team lead from operations. She's enthusiastic, very detail-oriented. Is her name listed on any prior compliance report? Has she led federal audits? She appear in the risk profile document attached to Appendix C of the insurance policy. Junior legal opened their mouth, closed it, fumbled to open the PDF and stall for time. Sutton turned his camera off, classic power move. His voice stayed on, disembodied, judgmental, divine. You've defaulted on a clause that underwrites your entire valuation. You didn't notify us. You didn't notify the underwriters. Now your supposed replacement has no paper trail. The CFO blurted, we assumed, don't assume. Now Sutton did sound angry. Clause 6B was inserted at our demand. We needed Julie M., last name because she carried the compliance profile. She was the funding's spine. You removed the spine and handed us a scarecrow. From my couch, where I was eating dry cereal and watching the markets with one eye, could practically feel the temperature drop through the fiber optic lines. Someone was sweating through their Banana Republic blazer. That afternoon, Melissa texted me. Did you do something? I replied, nope, just not doing anything anymore. She followed up, legal's been in the war room all day. They're trying to fabricate credential docs for Kelly from Ops, but she doesn't even know what a subrecipient agreement is. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into a federal resource portal I technically still had access to because no one had revoked my clearance, and quietly exported a compliance history report. All of it had my name, every signature, every timestamp, every past audit. There was no workaround. There was no shortcut. They could try to backfill, forge, panic pivot all they wanted. But the question Sutton had dropped like a guillotine still hung in the air. With someone certified for this kind of contract, the answer was still no. The needle that broke their corporate haystack came not from a senior exec or outside counsel, but from a second-year legal analyst named Priya over at the investment firm, probably underpaid, probably overcaffeinated, and almost certainly the only person who actually read the fine print. It was her flagged memo, tucked inside a compliance summary packet for Sutton's Monday briefing, that finally detonated the truth. Subject, urgent clause 6B, and insurance trigger, body, Julie M. Last name is named as sole key person in the executed term sheet. Clause 6B stipulates that her removal, voluntary or otherwise, without stakeholder notice, invalidates the funding's risk protection layer. Additionally, insurance policy #07KP 98390 4FED grant, attached, ties continued capital protection to her active project involvement. She had even highlighted it in yellow. Then, below it, in red, payout clause in event of key person termination, $7.5 M, and just like that, the truth crashed through the skylight of their wishful thinking. It wasn't just that they fired me, it was that they defaulted on their own risk coverage by firing me without activating the notification clause. And since HR had fumbled the offboarding and legal never initiated the notice to stakeholders, the policy kicked in by itself. A $7.5 million hit. Automated, unstoppable. A bleeding artery they couldn't cauterize. I didn't know all this right away, of course, but I felt it, like a shift in atmospheric pressure. Emails stopped arriving. No desperate LinkedIn pings. No polite calls to consult or advise as a contractor. Just radio silence. The kind that means your name's on a whiteboard somewhere under the word firestorm. Then, late Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number that registered as private. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Julie, the voice was careful, male, educated, mid-Atlantic with too much control, probably someone from investor relations. This is she. This is Thomas, from the investment side. He paused. Look, I just want to ask one thing and I swear it's off the record. I said nothing. He exhaled. Was this intentional? I waited. 3 seconds. 4, then, you have my termination letter, Thomas. That should answer everything. Silence. Then the click of a soft disconnect. I set the phone down gently, took a sip of my now cold tea, listened to the leaves outside rustle against the kitchen window. There was a peace in watching it all happen from a distance. No gloating, no anger, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the machine, so smug in its design, was tearing itself apart not because I sabotaged it, but because I walked away. Melissa, bless her, kept the updates trickling in. CFO looked like he aged 10 years overnight. They tried to get the insurer to freeze the payout. No luck. Someone tried to say the clause was symbolic. Sutton laughed. Meanwhile, the company's Slack leaks spilled out into Reddit threads, whistleblower forums, and a few untraceable Discord channels. Employees were jumping ship. Recruiters smelled blood. The PR team slapped together a press release that used the phrase adaptive restructure 7 times in 3 paragraphs. None of it worked, because behind all the noise, one thing remained true. They never thought the quiet woman in the corner office, one who skipped happy hour and used bullet points like surgical scalpels, was the linchpin. But she was, and the cost of forgetting that? $7.5 million. By Thursday morning, the boardroom was a crime scene with no survivors, just PowerPoint slides bleeding red and executives pointing fingers like it was a damn firing squad. The CFO looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. His shirt was wrinkled, or slicked back with the desperation of someone who thought looking composed might somehow rewind time. He was pacing between chairs, trying to talk over the murmurs, stammering phrases like procedural misstep and easy fix, while legal stared into their laptops like they were trying to digitally tunnel out of the building. We can backdate the notification, the CFO said for the 3rd time, voice rising. We'll say she notified us of her intention to resign. It wasn't an involuntary termination, no, Sutton cut in. One word, cold enough to frost the windows. The insurer had already responded in writing. Reversals were out of the question. A termination is a termination, and the policy was written in stone. No prior notice, no transitional plan, no replacement credentials. And now, Sutton continued, you're trying to rewrite history after the system's already triggered a payout clause that underpins your funding. Didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. That's the thing about people like Sutton, they don't yell. They just pronounce your autopsy in real time. The lead investor was seated at the head of the table, hands steepled in front of him, quiet as death. Then, slowly, he flipped open the physical copy of the term sheet, the one with the original blue ink signatures, the one that had traveled in a courier envelope with security tape and witness initials. He turned it toward the room, slammed a finger onto the page. There, he said, and there it was, my name, clear as daylight, under the clause titled KEY Person Designation Required Continuity. He didn't look at the CFO. He looked at legal. Why weren't we consulted before this decision was made? No answer. He turned to HR's VP, some guy they'd poached from a tech startup who thought culture meant pizza Fridays. Documentation showing compliance with Clause 6B before she was removed. The HR guy's mouth opened, closed, shook his head like a guilty child. And just like that, the room went quiet. No one wanted to speak because no one wanted their voice on the recording that would eventually be played during discovery. Later that night, the valuation hemorrhaged $120 million in pre-market adjustment. Funding, frozen. Acquisition talk, dead. Flagship product that my team's compliance work supported, put under review. Melissa texted me around midnight. The investors cleared the calendar. Sutton's flying in. You broke the building. I typed a reply, deleted it. Instead, I opened my notebook. The old one. The one with every grant number, every internal process I'd built. I flipped past the pages covered in black ink and crossed out tasks. Found the one I'd left intentionally blank. Wrote a single sentence. They only ever asked what I cost, not what I was worth. That was the part that stung the most. Not the layoff. Not the silence. Not the hollow thanks from HR or the sterile language on my termination letter. It was the fact that in all those years, every deadline met, every audit passed, every late-night emergency patched before it even surfaced, Not a single person had ever looked at me and said, "You matter more than the deliverable." They thought I was interchangeable. And now, they couldn't even buy what they'd thrown away. I closed the notebook, poured a glass of wine, sat on the porch and watched the lights of the city flicker like the end of a bad dream. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. And they wrote the check. It happened at 8:12 a.m., Friday morning. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and stress-induced sweat. Someone had finally unearthed the original funding binder from the locked cabinet legal, had labeled "Do Not Touch" without counsel. It was thick, heavy, embossed, still warm from the frantic hands flipping through it like salvation might be hiding between the pages. The lead investor, jaw tight, eyes bloodshot, ran his finger down the index until he hit the clause that had been haunting them all week. He opened the section slowly, like peeling a wound. Read it again, then read it out loud. In the event of removal or resignation of Julie M. Last name, company must notify all stakeholders within 48 hours to avoid default. He didn't speak, not at first, just sat there, blinking like someone trying to disarm a bomb with a spoon. Then came the sound, a low scrape, a sudden clatter. His chair tipped back and crashed to the floor. "The key person insurance is on her." The words echoed off the walls like a gunshot. The CFO flinched. His face went from red to white so fast it looked like a medical emergency. He opened his mouth, reached for an excuse, and found none. He stammered something about formality and miscommunication, but it came out garbled. Wet, pathetic. HR tried to step in. We didn't think the clause would be binding." The investor snapped, still standing. "Didn't think a legally executed clause tied to a federal compliance contract and a $30 million investment round would be binding." No one answered. Sutton, still ice calm in the corner, closed his tablet with a soft snap. His silence was louder than any yelling could have been. Across the room, a junior analyst quietly began closing tabs on her laptop, like distancing herself digitally might save her job. It wouldn't. Meanwhile, across town, I was sitting on my porch, coffee in one hand, legs tucked under a blanket, watching the morning fog curl across the lawn like it didn't know a corporate earthquake had just registered on the investor Richter scale. My phone buzzed. Bank notification, direct deposit $27,418.56 memo, final severance payment company name. I stared at it, smiled. That check, they thought it was a parting gift. Really, was hush money in a paper envelope they didn't know I'd already shredded with the weight of my silence. I sipped my coffee, let it burn just enough to feel real. Then, 5 minutes later, another buzz. Insurance notification. Policy #07KP 98,394 processing payment trigger still pending. But it was moving. They didn't just lose me. They lost the security blanket they didn't even know they were clutching. They cut out their own parachute mid-fall and expected the landing to feel like a promotion. And me? I didn't throw a match. I was the fire code. They ignored me. They replaced me. And now they were watching the structure collapse, one clause, one line, one overlooked name at a time. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and exhaled. Quiet, triumphant. Done. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.